It all started on one of the last cold nights of winter. I was 16 years old, lying in bed unable to sleep, something unusual for me. It was around 1 in the morning when I began to feel a presence in the room, as if something was watching me from the shadows. My hands were sweating and my heart was beating faster, but there was no rational explanation for what I was feeling. Slowly, moving to try to sleep, I turned to the window, and it was at that moment that I saw red eyes. They glowed in the darkness, watching me from outside, fixed on me. I felt fear consume me. From the outside, the figure had a huge body, covered in black fur. The most disturbing thing? Its face was not completely wolf-like, but it was not human either. Its jaw was long, but with lips that resembled a human mouth. The window glass fogged up as the creature breathed. Its front paws rested on the window frame, but as I looked more closely, I noticed something disturbing. They were not paws. They were hands. Human hands. My mind was in shock. Is it a wolf or a man? I thought. My muscles locked up and I felt my body freeze in sheer terror. As I tried to process the scene, the creature took a step back, away from the window. It wasn't just an animal. There was something human about it, and it was hunting me. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. I just stood there in growing fear. When I realized it, the creature had already disappeared, but the horror remained. I no longer knew what was real. That would only be the beginning of my coexistence with the Wolfman. The next morning, I woke up sweaty and shaking. My body was wet, but it wasn't sweat. The terror of the previous night had made me wet the bed. I couldn't tell my parents about this. My father, with whom I already had a difficult relationship, would be furious. So I got up early and washed the sheets in secret. My mother, suspicious, called me to talk. She asked me what had happened, and I hesitantly told her part of the story, avoiding the details about the creature. She became thoughtful and revealed something that frightened me even more. A few weeks ago, neighbors had begun reporting strange disappearances of animals on local farms. Dogs had disappeared without a trace, and there were rumors of a beast, something that wasn't entirely animal. "You must have seen the Wolfman," she whispered, as if afraid to say the name out loud. Looking out over the fields, she added, "Don't go out at night, especially alone. That creature, whatever it is, will return. It likes to stalk those who are vulnerable." The dogs disappearing from the farms began to make sense. At that moment, I knew that what I had seen was not a dream or a hallucination. The Wolfman was lurking, waiting for his moment to attack. What I didn't know was that his interest in me was personal. That weekend, I tried to push away the dark thoughts and continued with my routine. My friend Daniel, who I worked with on the plantations, and I decided to have a few drinks in the city. It was already night when we returned home, and we went our separate ways when we reached a crossroads that divided our paths. Only a few minutes had passed when I heard Daniel's screams. I ran desperately, without thinking, and there he was, lying on the ground, being dragged by a huge creature. Terror took hold of me. It was him again, the Wolfman. His red eyes glowed in the darkness, and he was dragging Daniel towards the mountains with ease, as if Daniel were a toy. I ran after him, shouting my friend's name, but the creature quickly disappeared into the trees. Darkness surrounded me, but I could not abandon him. I grabbed my machete and continued the search, until after a few minutes I found Daniel lying on the ground, unconscious and covered in blood. He had been seriously injured, but he was alive. The bite on his arm showed that he had tried to defend himself, but the worst was yet to come. As I tried to drag my friend back to the main path, the creature returned. Now in the moonlight, I could see it in detail. Its body was covered in black fur, but its face had something human about it. It walked on 2 legs, but the expression in its eyes was not that of an animal. It was something more calculated, more intelligent. It watched me with hatred. Then in a hoarse voice, almost like a whisper, it spoke, "Tell everyone to get out of here. You are not welcome. I will be back." I froze. The creature was speaking. It was half man, half beast, and it was giving us a warning. After that encounter, nothing was the same. Daniel's father was furious and accused my father of being the one to blame for us crossing the beast's path. Tensions between our families increased. Meanwhile, the Wolfman continued to lurk. Sometimes at night, I felt its presence. I could hear his footsteps outside the house, and more than once I found claw marks on the walls. My father, who had always been skeptical, finally gave in. We could no longer ignore what was happening. He gathered some men from the town, all armed and ready to put an end to this threat. I didn't want to go, but my father insisted. "You've seen the creature up close. You know what we're dealing with. If we just sit around and do nothing, he'll finish us all off." That night, with our weapons in hand, we set off toward the mountains, where we believed the wolfman was hiding. Daniel, still wounded, joined us. His thirst for revenge was greater than his pain. When we reached the old cabin where the creature was hiding, the attack was brutal and swift. The silver bullets we carried seemed to be the only thing capable of hurting the wolfman. He fought fiercely, but after several shots, he fell to the ground, wounded. Before he died, the creature's body began to transform. The furry skin disappeared, and what was left was an old man, naked, ordinary-looking, except for his eyes, which still glowed red. Silence filled the place as the life left the body of that being. After the death of the wolfman, we thought everything was resolved. However, something dark hovered over us. Daniel began to exhibit strange behaviors. He would isolate himself, disappear for hours at a time, and sometimes reappear with cuts or bites on his body. When questioned, he avoided talking about it. Something was wrong. The stories of men who transformed into wolves were not just legends. Perhaps without knowing it, Daniel had been contaminated by the curse. We began to fear that, just like the wolfman we killed, Daniel was doomed to transform. The creature could have passed its essence, its curse, to him. Time passed and everything seemed to return to normal. But the silence of the night was never the same again. Daniel's disappearance on the last full moon sealed the fate. I knew what had happened, even without having witnessed it. The curse of the werewolf had found a new host. The creature we had hunted and killed was just one piece in the endless cycle. Now my old friend was the new beast. And so, on a silent night, with the moon shining brightly and listening to the distant howls, I knew that the real battle was yet to come. The legend of the werewolf would live on, until someone found a way to break the curse that plagued our land. The werewolf would return, this time in a different form, but the same terror would haunt us.